A new direction for the UK, or just another short-lived Prime Minister in the growing line of post-Brexit British leaders? After entering Downing Street on Monday, Andy Burnham pieced together his first cabinet. What do their track records tell us about where they will take the country?
Let me start by saying the unbearable suffering in Gaza is a scar on our collective conscience. It's completely unacceptable that innocent Palestinians, including children, continue to be killed.
As a start of a term, I can say tonight that the first foreign visit I would do as leader of the Labour Party would be to Israel.
Well, you know, and what is objectionable about him? His racism, his misogyny, his incredibly peculiar relationship with Russia.
And the truth.
And the truth, most of all the truth.
Speaker, this is fundamental to the principles of Britain. A belief in the rule of law, a belief that any military action we take must be justified in terms of the cause and also the potential consequences, and that we strain every sinew to make the international institutions that we have in our world work to deal with the outrages in Syria.
We must also enforce our rules and remove those who have no right to be here.
The Iranian regime is a destructive force which has slaughtered protesters in its own streets and inflicts terrible suffering, especially against its own people.
In the UK, the Prime Minister, Chancellor, Foreign and Home Secretaries make up the big four of government. That's Andy Burnham, Mr Manchesterism, John Healey, who resigned from Starmer's cabinet over low defence spending, Ed Miliband, Britain's net zero architect, and Shabana Mahmoud, who's cracked down on immigration and Palestine Action. Here to help piece that puzzle together for us is MEE columnist Peter Oborne. Peter, welcome back to the show. So what are your initial thoughts on Burnham's cabinet picks?
I wouldn't have said it made a lot of difference. That's my initial thought. You know, you could have the same Home Secretary. John Healey as Chancellor is obviously a formidable machine politician. I wouldn't have said he was imaginative or radical in any way. And he buys into more defence spending. So where's the public? Where's the help for welfare or whatever? And who was the fourth one? I've now forgotten.
So we've got Ed Miliband in Foreign
Ed
Secretary.
Miliband, who's most interesting.
The
most interesting of all of that
departure
would be Mr. Miliband, who supported a two-state solution for a long time. It's on the sort of soft left of Labour. As you were highlighting there, he was opposed to intervention in Syria. And I think that the issue of what Britain will happen to British foreign policy is interesting, particularly since there are conflicting reports about the existence or otherwise of Hamish Faulkner as Middle East Minister. I've seen a report that he's been kept. I've seen a report that he's vanished without trace. So that would, with the departure of Hamish Faulkner, might mean that quite radical changes are being thought of in terms of Israel, Gaza, Palestine, Lebanon.
Do we think so? Because Middle East eye audiences will be definitely interested in whether there will be a change in the UK stance on the Middle East in various respects. A key one is, of course, Gaza. Andy Burnham has come forward and apologised for Labour's initial response to Israel's war on Gaza, for not calling for a ceasefire earlier. If we start with that, do you think that signals any relevant change in direction?
The initial response, I imagine, it means that he's also apologising for Sir Keir Starmer's support for collective punishment in the, about a week after very serious and damaging political remark.
Yeah, Starmer was asked about Israel's response on infrastructure Gaza. He said,
I think it signals. I think this signals fairly major changes. I know there are those who are sceptical, but let's just look at the politics of it. You know that Andy Burnham came in because of the political failure, gross political failure of Starmer. He's basically split the Labour Party. People don't say this, but that's what's happened, quite deliberately so, courtesy of his strategist, Morgan McSweeney. They drove out the left. So there's maybe 15% of voters who've been might well have voted, would have been traditional Labour voters, have been driven away, sort of deliberately so. We don't want you, you're anti-Semitic or you're Muslim or, you know, we're going to shake off the flies. All this language from senior Labour sources. Now, I assume that Andy Burnham is going to try and remedy that. That's the first point. The second point is there's always a right thing to do in politics. You know, one of Dennis Healey, one of the great figures, the namesake of the new Chancellor.
Yeah, second
he said, "Where in doubt, do the right thing." Now, there's no way you can accuse the government of having done the right thing on Gaza. We have continued to supply arms in enormous quantities with the military. Surveillance of Gaza and diplomatic support for the Netanyahu government during what most experts say unequivocally is a genocide. So you can't accuse Mr. Keir Starmer of having done the right thing. So I think that Andy Burnham will try and do the right thing. And there's also a precautionary reason that when the International Court of Justice finally resolves whether this is a genocide or not, whether the South African case is correct, all the evidence suggests that he will say this is a genocide. When that happens, there's going to be real jeopardy for Sir Keir Starmer. I mean, under British law, the International Criminal Court Act, to aid and abet a genocide is you can be prosecuted for that. And Andy Burnham will have been advised about the legal position he's in. So if I was him, I would want. He was lucky enough to be not part of the administration as mayor of Manchester, but he want to keep his hands clean.
I mean, yeah, there are people who characterise Andy Burnham as a people pleaser and trying to court sort of every side. And he's definitely towing a careful line. He hasn't criticised a lot of the things that you've pointed out were very flawed about Britain's foreign policy on Gaza. He hasn't yet explicitly criticised the arms and provisions to Israel, but he has criticised the initial failure to call for a ceasefire, early on in the genocide.
Well, the other things, I mean, I think it is inevitable that Britain will ban trade with the settlements.
Okay.
It should have happened years ago, well before October the 7th. But I think that's going to happen. I mean, remember that we are seeing a real-time ethnic cleansing. You know, Bet Salem says 59 communities have been erased, but it's more than that. That's happening. We can see. I can't believe it hasn't happened already. This is being sanctioned from the Netanyahu government. It's carried out. It's official state policy, although it's denied. It clearly is. And I think that there's going to be a ban on trade with the settlements, and it'll be a nice moment for. It's going to be denounced, of course. And it is interesting to see this rhetoric from the White House sources.
Yeah.
Saying that they are displeased with the appointment of Ed Miliband.
Yeah, so Miliband has certainly indicated that, in the past that he's been very critical of the settlements. And Trump appears to be pretty pissed off about his appointment, at least according to The Telegraph, who's spoken to Trump sources.
By the way, I'd be very skeptical. The Telegraph allowing itself to become a vehicle for US.
I think they did. I counted 3 articles today about Trump's feelings about Ed Miliband as Foreign Secretary.
If I was British Prime Minister, I would take the view that it was none of Mr. Trump's business what I do. I'm Prime Minister in Britain, thank you very much, and you're President of America. Let's carry along on that basis. But the Daily Telegraph, which used to be a serious newspaper, gives the impression of siding with Trump against Burnham. Now that's really rotten. And when I worked on the Telegraph, when it was run by serious people, it wouldn't have done that.
Really, that's interesting. I mean, certainly the Telegraph is indicative that indicates that the special relationship with the US is very important. Miliband will not just be a threat in Trump's eyes because of his positions on Israel, his expressions on Israel. There is, of course, the US war on Iran happening at the moment.
Yeah, this is an enormous question which immediately faces Burnham, is whether to allow the Americans to use, if it wants to carry on this war, British bases. Do we want to be part of this war? And that is a massive question he's got to face. Starmer sort of fudged it.
So you think that, Starmer has allowed the US to access UK air bases for what it considers to be defensive operations, including in the Strait of Hormuz. Ed Miliband has consistently been against intervention. He came out against the Iraq war. He wasn't an MP at the time. He did block intervention in Syria. Do you think that with Ed Miliband as Foreign Secretary, the UK might revoke US access to its bases in the Middle East?
That would be I think the way it would work in government is Miliband could have a view on it as Foreign Secretary, as will it if the new Defence Secretary, Wes Streeting. Okay. But the decision that sort of decision will be made by Downing Street, but I think it's perfectly possible. And of course, then there'll be wild denunciations of this government from the right, betraying Britain and all the rest of it. But it would be a very fine moment in British foreign policy. Let's hope that Burnham has the courage to do this, and I think it would really establish him as Prime Minister. Let's not forget that may well be an election this autumn.
And now, as you point out, Labour has lost a lot of votes, to the left and the right, but more so to the left, judging by analysis. And one of the main issues here is Gaza. It isn't just relevant what Burnham does about Palestine, Gaza on the international stage. There's also been a lot of controversy at home over the policing of pro-Palestinian protesters, particularly Palestine Action, peaceful demonstrators. We've seen thousands of arrests since the proscription. This has been shepherded by Shabana Mahmoud, who stays as Home Secretary. She's also presided over a real crackdown on immigration. This has been very destructive for many families, but it has also succeeded in bringing down the Boris wave of legal immigration since Brexit. Do you think that Andy Burnham is sort of judging the decision with Shabana Mahmoud right? He's obviously trying to retain some of the conservative reform voters, but at what cost? How do you feel about her remaining as Home Secretary?
You have to remember that Mr. Burnham is in charge of a coalition. He's got to appeal to coalition. He cannot govern in the interest entirely of columnists of Middle East Eye. One understands that, and I do accept that politically it has been a triumph to bring down the scale of immigration. At a time when that has been the major problem. It's a real fighting point against reform. And I think there's something else about Andy Burnham, and this I very much like, that he does come from the north. He's a real northerner. And he sort of gels with ordinary people in a way which, very sadly, Sir Keir Starmer couldn't do. And I think that if he can present the Labour government as something which can take on and defeat reform and get rid of what is potentially a sort of almost a neo-fascist movement we have, AFD-like movement anyway, I think all that would be a terrific achievement.
So just to close, you were pretty optimistic about Burnham replacing Starmer. Having seen the layout of his new government, do you still feel the same way?
Of course I feel optimistic. And as a British citizen, it would be nice to have a government which worked for the first time in about a decade. So I really hope it comes off. One failed government after another is not a good thing.
Yeah, not for anybody. Well, Peter, thank you so much for joining me.